Hello, my name is S.K. Williams, and the video that I am presenting today was intended to be one video and became another one. I'm presenting it anyway because what I say in the middle and toward the end is worth saying on its own independently of the topic, and I intend to replace the intended video with one that is more focused on the actual topic next week, and then I can move on from that topic. But for now, I'm presenting this video. It was intended to be one thing and became another, and I would still like to present it. I don't have time to do the real video, so I'll do that one next week. But I hope you enjoy this feature presentation. Just bear in mind, I made all these videos without a script, and this one simply veered off into an odd direction. It is nevertheless one that I worked on and wish to present, so I present it to you. With that said, I now present you my video. Hello, my name is S.K. Williams, and today I would like to discuss an atheist who visited my channel to castigate me. Bear in mind, this video is actually a sequel of sorts to a previous video. It is also the fourth actual video I've made on this topic, which is unusual. I usually only make 3 in a set and then release those 3. But the reason I'm making 4 is because the last time I made 4, and I like the symmetry because this one is a continuation of the last. So why did I make 4 the last time? Well, it's because I had intended to make only 3, but I had forgotten that I had made 3. I thought I had only made 2, so I made a 4th one, and I didn't want to waste the video, so I uploaded all 4. And I intended to do only 3 this time, but as I thought about it, I decided to do 4 because the other set had 4. So because of a mistake in a previous video set, I intentionally did 4 here. Such is life. Having said that, I will actually be referring to the 4 videos that I made as a video because I made them at roughly the same time, about the same topic, and having mostly the same information. I do selectively place some information in some videos that I don't put in the other. That helps me determine what the Intelligence Synthetica that monitors my channel likes and doesn't like. I have noticed that lately I've been able to post videos and all 4 of them go through, so I'm not being as heavily restricted as I used to be before my exile. But I have maintained this practice and shall for a little while longer. However, I will soon be discontinuing it and going back to having a normal load pattern of having only 1 video per topic unless I have an unusual focus or interest in it. However, when I made the 3 videos, I generally treat them as just 1 video, even though there's actually 3 of them. And that's the way I'm going to do with this one as well. This is a video that is a sequel to my previous video, for the sake of viewing them as a continuum. Having said all that, let's get to the main point, shall we? As you may know, if you have witnessed my previous videos, I made a video about how it's impossible to talk to militant atheists. Without going over too much detail, because I don't want to bog down this video with the things that I've already said in the last ones, you can go and listen to them. The main point that I was making about militant atheists is that they are very arrogant and that they have already decided that they know everything that religion teaches and how to debunk it and what logical fallacies religious people use. And when they go to Christian channels, and they always attack Christians on Christian channels, they'll always repeat the same arguments we've all heard a million times, while not really listening to you when you tell them that they're wrong about what Christians believe or what Christians say. And bizarrely, they act like the Christian is the one making the claims and making the argument, and all they're doing is passively standing there asking for evidence, when in reality they come to Christians to attack them. So they're not just passively standing there. And because they already know what Christians believe and already know how irrational Christians are and already know that every Christian belief is based on logical fallacies and every Christian argument is based on logical fallacies, all they have to do is point out the logical fallacies and how irrational Christians are and be angry at Christians for their irrationality and evil. And they don't bother listening to you when you tell them that they are wrong. A perfect example of that would be when I was talking to one such atheist recently, in the previous video, and I pointed out how even the famous false prophecy of Jesus, where he predicted the end times and his second coming would happen within the lifetime of the disciples, that atheists love to use to prove that Christianity is false, was not actually a false prophecy. Because the false prophecy that failed to come true, because it's been 2,000 years, and Jesus said that they would see the end times and the second coming in the lifetime of the disciples, and it didn't happen. It's been 2,000 years and they're all dead. Clearly showing Jesus was a false prophet, actually came true, because it's not really a prophecy of the end times and the second coming. Rather, the prophecy in the Olivet Discourse was about the destruction of the temple and the end of the age that they were in. And the prophecy was actually fulfilled. And it was fulfilled by Jesus being revealed to be the Messiah on Palm Sunday, his trial, his crucifixion and death on the cross, his resurrection, his ascension, the creation of the church at Pentecost, and the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. All of which happened within the lifetime of the disciples. So the idea that he predicted something would happen that did not happen, that he predicted within their lifetime they would see this happen, and it's been 2,000 years and they're all dead, so that failed to occur, isn't actually true. Because the prophecy that the atheist community loves to say was a false prophecy that failed to occur actually did occur. And in his response to me, The first line he said was a quote. And the quote was, "This generation shall not pass away." And then he accused me of using mental gymnastics. This was a bizarre response, but it makes sense if you understand that atheists don't actually listen to what you're saying. And he wasn't really responding in an intelligent way to what I was saying. He just combined two things. Atheists today have made it a dogma of their holy religion of atheism that Jesus was a failed apocalyptic prophet, a term that was created by the divine prophet Bart Ehrman, most holy and sacred. Hallowed be his name. He is a Bible scholar, therefore he is correct. And of course, they don't seem to realize that just because Bart Ehrman said something doesn't make it true. What Bart Ehrman is saying is also not always the consensus view of biblical scholars. And personally, I've never really been all that impressed by Bart Ehrman, and the more I read about him, the less impressed I get. They always, when I say that though, blame that on my religion. I don't like Bart Ehrman because he hurts my feelings, because he's giving facts and logic that goes against my religion. And they don't really seem to address the criticisms I have. They just find personal fault with me. And the same thing happens when they say you're using mental gymnastics and all that. But atheists today are conditioned to think of the line where Jesus said, "This generation shall not pass away," is a clear smoking gun. Because Jesus said that this prophecy would be fulfilled within the lifetime of the disciples. And it's been 2,000 years, and all the disciples are dead, and everyone in that generation are dead. The prophecy failed, and I should just deal with it. He quoted the line, because that line is a line atheists love to quote. That line is what proves Jesus is a failed apocalyptic prophet. The only problem is that my explanation means that the prophecy was already fulfilled. When I said Jesus was not a failed apocalyptic prophet, I wasn't saying that this prophecy would eventually be fulfilled in the future. I was saying it had been fulfilled 2,000 years ago, within the lifetime of the disciples. And yet he still quoted the line as if it was a smoking gun that proved me wrong. And then, of course, said I was using mental gymnastics. When atheists talk about mental gymnastics, it really just means they want to create the impression that what you're saying is obviously wrong without actually addressing it. But if my argument was that Jesus had already fulfilled the prophecy, and that the prophecy was actually about the end of the age, not the end of the world, which is how it's phrased in things like the King James Bible, because the Greek word is actually aeon, which means age. And if my point was that the prophecy was about the creation of the Messianic kingdom, with the church being the Messianic kingdom, not some kingdom in which Jesus comes to build later, and that the entire prophecy has been fulfilled, how does saying, "This generation shall not pass away till they see these things," prove me wrong? Of course it doesn't. But that's the point. This bloke didn't listen to me and just said I was using mental gymnastics, and acted as if "this generation shall not pass away" proved me wrong. He didn't listen. He didn't respond to what I actually said. He just dismissed me. And you see this quite often with atheist arguments. They don't really understand what it is Christians are saying or what it is Christians believe, but they know how to attack them. And they know how to assign a logical fallacy to them. But atheists today don't actually learn how to use logic or the underlying logic behind the logical fallacies. They simply know that there's a list of logical fallacies and that religious people always commit these logical fallacies in their arguments, and what the arguments that religious people use and how to assign the logical fallacy. It never dawns on the atheist that what they're debunking, the argument they know how to debunk because they know exactly what logical fallacy it's committing, isn't the actual argument the Christian is making. And when they talk about religious people, they always mean just Christians. And that's because the atheists, who are not religious, because atheism is not a religion, atheism is a lack of belief in a God, atheism is a religion, like not collecting stamps is a hobby, have actually made a religion out of what they think an atheist should be, which is not the same thing as saying a mere lack of belief in a God is a religion. I'm actually saying that the belief system they carry within the modern atheist community is a religion. I'm not saying atheism itself is a religion. It doesn't really matter that I'm explaining this, though, because any atheist listening to this video has just heard me say, atheism is a religion, and will, of course, attack me for saying that. And if I point out that my argument is not that atheism is a religion, it's that the modern atheist community has certain beliefs about what an atheist should be and what an atheist should believe, and that this is a religion. They'll just say that I called atheism a religion and then denied calling atheism a religion and use that as proof that I'm a liar and use it as fuel for more mockery at my expense. They'll never address the real point I'm making, though, because it's way easier to know that religious people will often call atheism a religion and to mock religious people for calling atheism a religion, and then to hear me saying that they follow a form of religion and then ridicule me for saying atheism is a religion, and then mock me for not realizing that atheism is just a lack of belief in a God. And the real irony about all this is that atheism is not a lack of belief in a God. Atheism is a belief that no gods exist. The idea that atheism is a mere lack of belief in a God originates with the presumption of atheism that was written in the 1970s by Anthony Flew. And in the presumption of atheism, Anthony Flew even admits that this is a new definition of the word atheism. And the only reason this definition exists, again, according to the presumption of atheism, Anthony Flew admitted this, but the only reason atheism is by definition a lack of belief in a God is so that atheists would not have the burden of proof. The problem with this is, of course, that it's disingenuous and it's cowardly. It's obvious that atheists actually are claiming that God does not exist. And the idea that atheists are not claiming that God doesn't exist, that they merely lack belief in a God, is really just an excuse to get them out of the burden of proof. And it shows how fundamentally ridiculous modern-day atheism is. Why should I become an atheist unless the atheist can prove that God does not exist, that there's no such thing as the supernatural, and that we live in a naturalistic, materialistic world? Because every atheist that I talk to that tells me that atheism is just a lack of belief in a God also calls me delusional for believing in God. They refer to God as a delusion. To be delusional means that you persist in a false belief even after you have been shown evidence that your belief is false. This means that I am being told that I have been shown evidence that God does not exist, evidence that clearly proves that God does not exist, but I persist in believing in God regardless, by someone who does not have to show me evidence that God does not exist because they don't believe God does not exist, they just lack belief. Well, how does the atheist know that I have been shown evidence that God does not exist if the atheist does not have that evidence themselves? The idea that the atheist can call someone delusional for believing in God, while at the same time not having to show evidence that God doesn't exist, is in itself an absurdity. But that is the situation that we find ourselves in. The atheist merely lacks belief in a God. They do not believe there is no God. They just lack belief in a God. Therefore, they are making no claims and have no burden of proof when they call you delusional for believing in a magical sky wizard. And keep in mind, the atheist community also refers to God as people's imaginary friend. And they'll even talk about how tragic it is that grown adults still have an imaginary friend when referring to God. And by calling God imaginary, they actually are saying that God does not exist. That's what imaginary means. It means that God does not have an actual existence. He exists just in the imagination of people. And you'll hear them say things like, God is just pretend, humans invent gods, that God is a myth, God is a fairy tale, God is fiction. I've even heard atheists outright state that God does not exist. And at the same time, I have to accept that the atheists saying all of this are not making any claims and have no burden of proof. In fact, I have to accept that if I demand evidence of them, that I am actually being dishonest. That I am shifting the burden of proof onto the atheist. It doesn't belong on the atheist, it belongs on the theist. That the situation is that I have claimed that a God exists, but that I do not have to prove that my God exists. The burden of proof is on the atheist to prove me wrong, and how dishonest and logically fallacious that is of me. And of course, that's not really true, especially when the atheist comes to attack you. When the atheist comes to a Christian channel to mock and ridicule Christians and say that their beliefs are wrong, the atheist was not passively standing there lacking belief in a God until the Christian came to convert them. And when the atheist starts referring to you as delusional for believing in a magical sky fairy and comparing God to Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy, and referring to God as just pretend and your imaginary friend, and talking about how humans have a propensity to create gods, what is the difference between any of the fictional gods you don't believe in and the Christian God, they are very obviously claiming that God does not exist. And pretending that pointing that out makes you dishonest, and it means you're shifting the burden of proof, has always been disingenuous. So what does this have to do with my visitor? Well, believe it or not, the visitor to my channel runs an atheist channel. And while it's been 2 weeks since said person attacked me on my own channel, and they probably have other videos loaded onto their own channel now, The last video that they had loaded at the time of my engagement with them was about how theists like me are dishonest and that we shift the burden of proof onto the atheist, and how the atheist does not have a burden of proof, they just lack belief. In fact, if you look at their channel, it is a bog standard atheist channel that repeats the same old dull claims that we've heard for over 20 years now. Every single video is a repetition of exactly the same arguments. This is important because every video on this atheist's channel, every single video is an atheist video explaining how religion is irrational, how religious people are themselves irrational, and how all of their arguments rely on logical fallacies, and how real logic proves that we live in a materialist universe with no supernatural powers, that gods don't exist, that Christianity is cruel and malicious and evil, and that religious people are unintelligent and think with their emotions and not with their evidence. Every single video. And of course, none of them say anything new. They're all repeating the same things that other atheists have said. Which, of course, is not because this person watches a lot of atheist video channels and perhaps reads atheist websites and blogs and books. No. The reason is because this atheist thinks rationally and looks at the evidence and follows it where it leads. And the reason this person says all the same things the other atheists do is because it's like mathematics. If you say 2 + 2 = 4, it doesn't mean you're just quoting someone. It's like mathematics. The reason I'm saying that is because every time you point out that atheists are repeating the same arguments, they'll say it's like mathematics. Of course, it isn't like mathematics. And this man was actually just quoting the arguments that other atheists made. That's simply the reality. There was nothing original. It was just quoting the same things you heard Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Ross say 20 years ago. It was quoting the same things you heard from Sam Harris or Christopher Hitchens or Richard Dawkins or Daniel Dennett. It's the same things that you hear from Pelagia. It's the same things that you hear in Mythvision. It's the same old, ridiculous nonsense. And that's the point. But the irony behind all of this is, this atheist who runs an atheist channel that does nothing but attack Christians, or as they would put it, religion and religious people, where every single video is about how irrational religion is, and how all religious arguments are based on logical fallacies, and how religious people are driven by their emotions, not by reason, how dangerous and awful religion is, and how irrational and cruel Christianity is. Every single video is that. Had the audacity to tell me that I was driven by resentment because I made videos discussing what atheists had told me on a Christian channel. Keep in mind, even though I do discuss atheists quite a lot on my channel is not a Christian apologetics channel, and I don't discuss atheists all the time. In fact, I've made several videos that have nothing to do with atheists at all. Granted, most of my fare lately have been about atheists, but there's been a reason for that. Notably that they contributed to the limited state to which my channel now exists in by constantly reporting me to gaggle, which of course gave greater scrutiny to my channel from the Intelligence Synthetica. I don't think they are the only reason that my channel faced censorious limitations, but I do know that they are a contributing factor that perhaps put it over the edge. And this did eventually lead to me being deplatformed for 7 months. Which is ironic because that also came up. You see, this atheist who runs an atheist YouTube channel that exists to debunk religion by showing how it's based on logical fallacies and to educate people and to teach them how to think rationally using critical thinking, thus destroying religion which rests on pure emotion and egotism, also responded to me pointing out that I had been locked out of my Gaggle account for 7 months by telling me that I was not locked out of my Gaggle account for 7 months, that I had not been censored. And they even explained that the reason I had low views and low engagement on my channel was because my content just wasn't very good. But I wasn't being censored by Gaggle. No, I just don't make good content. Of course, they also pointed out that the reason I focused on that instead of the other points they made was because I went immediately to the one that bruised my ego. And it just shows how I'm thinking emotionally and not rationally. I felt emotionally hurt by this person pointing out the logic that I wasn't being restricted. I just wasn't making good videos. Well, the joke's on them. You see, I'm not a professional YouTuber. I made videos largely as a hobby. I already knew my videos weren't very good. I never had very high views. And I never complained about that. I also know that when I first started the channel, my uploads were very irregular, and that never helps the algorithm to choose you. And then my house burned down. And for about 5 years, I didn't make any videos for my channel. Maybe 2 or 3 years. I think I made one explaining that my house burned down, but very incrementally. And when I got a little more stable and started putting more videos up, my idea was to complete a project that I had begun, where I read the Bishop's Bible of 1568. Because no one has ever done an audio Bible of the Bishop's Bible of 1568. And I set it to animation. The animation doesn't really illustrate what the biblical texts are talking about. It's mostly just me in cartoon form reading the text of the Bishop's Bible with a cartoon depiction of God behind me doing some wacky things. It's pretty quiche. It's pretty simplistic. It's not very great animation. I'm using Crazy Talk Animator, the first Crazy Talk Animator, not even the later Crazy Talk Animators, and even then I barely do anything that would be too time consuming that would make it look more realistic. or have more natural motions. It's very stiff motions. It's very cut-out animation. But in my defense, that's how I do a lot of my videos, and in terms of this, the video only exists so that I'll have a video to load onto a video site. The main point is the audio tract, not the video. And the video tract has me also trying to use historical pronunciations, not just read a historical Bible. And it was a Bible that was never popular even at the time it was released. That's why it was replaced with the authorized version, or what we would now call the King James version of the Bible. The Bishop's Bible was never beloved, and it's largely unknown now. So I'm reading a Bible that is not very popular. In a historical cadence, set to ridiculous animation. I honestly didn't think that this would give me very much traction. I really didn't have any pretensions that this would become somehow a popular thing. Because why would it? Perhaps some historians or other people doing research into such matters might appreciate the effort and may listen to a few of the videos for research because it is an audio version of the Bishop's Bible. But I don't think that most people who just want to hear the Bible are going to select the 1568 Bishop's Bible. They'll either pick a more contemporary Bible, which is what most people do now, or they'll pick the King James version of the Holy Bible. They're not going to pick a Bible from 1568. That's just absurd. That's something that people aren't going to do. But this was a labor of love because I wanted to be the first person to do an audio version of the Bishop's Bible. And as it stands now, even if someone else comes along and manages to do the entire Bishop's Bible before I get done with it, I will still at least be the first person to begin such a project. So I can be glad about that. But I never had any pretensions that this would be particularly popular, especially since I had 3 different computers crash on me within a single year, very unfortunate luck, and the netbook that I'm using right now has very poor speakers and very poor audio. As a result, my audio quality is much lower than it used to be. I plan on getting a microphone to see if that helps, but my financial situation isn't great, so getting just a cheap microphone doesn't help. It wouldn't really sound any better. I would have to get a nice one, and that's not a priority. I may, of course, use Intelligence Synthetica to clean up the audio. But for right now, the audio quality isn't great on any of my videos, and the cartoons that I do, which is mostly just me talking because I do commentary, I had actually planned on doing a cartoon series early on, but I never got around to it, and I just kept it with an animation channel. And I might one day do an animated series, something like Freedom Tunes, only with my own views. Something that's just short little takes on something. But who knows? But mostly I just give commentary. And I'm quite used to my commentary not being very popular. Although, weirdly, my ideas are becoming more popular with other people independently of me, so maybe I'll take off, I don't know. But back about 10 years ago, I very much was an odd man out, and no one really wanted to listen to me. Because I have very unusual views, or had very unusual views. My views really haven't changed much, but society around me has, so my views are now much different. For example, I don't believe in a strict separation of religion and state, because there's no such thing as neutrality in terms of religion, and secularism, far from being a neutral position toward religion, is a religion in its own right and imposes its beliefs. Well, most people don't accept that secularism is a religion, but that you do hear people saying you can't really be neutral when it comes to religion. That there is no neutral point of view, like I was saying years ago. I'm not saying they got it from me and they stole it from me and didn't give credit. I think people are arriving at the same conclusion I have. But when I said that years ago, I got mocked and ridiculed. Obviously, you can be neutral toward religion. Look at the founding fathers. And both conservatives and liberals agreed with that. They didn't think they agreed on it because you always heard liberals saying that the conservatives wanted a theocracy, a Christian theocracy. That was never true. But then again, the left has always accused any right-wing politician in America as being like the German leader from the Second Great Conflagration era. So, it's not really all that odd to hear that sort of thing. Incidentally, this video is very long and I haven't gotten to the point, so I may have to make an unprecedented fifth video on this topic. I'm not really obsessed with the topic. I know I seem that way. Really, I'm just doing this because, again, I like breaking up the videos into 3 parts, or really 3 versions of the same thing to avoid censorship. But this one veered off into left field, so it's not really about the same topic. Still, the point I'm making is that I never really thought of my videos as particularly good anyway. When I talked about being locked out of my Gaggle account, I wasn't complaining about having low viewership and low engagement, and blaming the low viewership and engagement on some sort of conspiracy against me without looking at the facts and perhaps improving my product because I just couldn't realize that my videos weren't very good. My actual complaint was that I was no longer allowed to post new videos, and I was no longer allowed to comment. I was no longer even allowed into my account. And there is a very big difference between I am not being allowed into my account and I'm not getting very good views. This person acted as if the fault was mine and I needed to realize it, even though it wasn't. And then he said, well, even if you were being... And I really hate when atheists do that even if you were. But then said, well, you could have been just subject to normal moderation policies. And keep in mind, I had shown evidence that Gaggle had done this to other people. I showed a quote from the House Judiciary Committee saying this and saying they were launching an investigation. And on the House Judiciary Committee website, they even host the letter from Gaggle admitting they did this, and it's been all over the news. And the person referred to the quote from the House Judiciary Committee as a partisan press release. So much for atheist logic and reason. No, I was locked out of my account for 7 months and had my channel taken away, and all of a sudden, it's my fault. Come on. Am I supposed to take you seriously if you're an atheist? Come on. And of course, they said that I was using bog standard apologetics, and I really was using logical fallacies and engaged in special pleading and all that. Didn't actually address the arguments I had made, just said that I was guilty of all the logical fallacies. And of course, the real problem is that what I was saying to them proved that I was thinking emotionally and not evidentially. No, I wasn't. I'm thinking with the evidence. The evidence shows that gaggle, censored people. That's why I talk funny on this channel sometimes. That's why I use the words like censor instead of the real word. That's why I talk about Adolf Hitler instead of the real name of the guy who caused the Second Great Conflagration. That's why I say Second Great Conflagration. Granted, I may not need to be quite so drastic now. Gaggle has admitted its wrongdoings and is lifting its restrictions, but I have noticed I have some restrictions still, and I don't know where the borders are, so I'm gradually rolling back on it. A lot of this may be unnecessary now, but it very much was necessary then. And Gaggle very much went against conservative voices, trying to silence them. And it really began picking up with the plague from a few years ago, but has since expanded into other areas. They would censor people who criticized Joe Biden and called into question his mental competency. That was before, of course, it became public knowledge that he had experienced cognitive decline. Or they would try and curb people who supported Donald Trump. And keep in mind, I don't run a political channel. I did not endorse Donald Trump for president. I'm glad he won simply because if Kamala Harris had won, the would have continued and possibly gotten worse. And we see attacks on liberty of word throughout Europe, especially in the UK now. So we do live in very dark times, and I'm very grateful that Donald Trump won. Simply because he does stand more for liberty of word than did Kamala Harris. And the silencing of liberty of word is one of the greatest issues of our day. And simply put, even though in the eyes of the same atheists who attack, because they're all progressives, the idea that because atheism is a mere lack of belief in a God, atheists are all over the place in the political spectrum, that's not really true. They're all progressives. And in their eyes, if you support Donald Trump, that makes you MAGA, and if you're MAGA, that means that you're in a cult and you worship Donald Trump as a god and think he's a new messiah. I don't think that. I know that Trump, like everyone else, has problems. I don't think he's as problematic as they depict him as being, but I don't agree with everything that Trump says or does. But I don't think he's a monster either. But you should also know that in reality, I'm a monarchist. And even though progressives like saying Donald Trump has ripped up the Constitution and made himself a king, they do this to play off of America's hatred of kings more than based on reality. When I say I am a monarchist, I don't mean, hell yeah, Donald Trump, make him king. Who cares about the Constitution? Donald Trump is a duly elected president and not a king. And by the way, king does not mean the same thing as tyrant, or that you have given all power to one man to rule. There's more to monarchism than just dominance by one man, which isn't really how monarchy was understood historically. But as a point of fact, I'm an actual monarchist. I believe in having a monarchy. I'm not a Republican, and by that I don't just mean the Republican Party, I mean that I don't believe in having a republic as a form of government. I've said that before in my channel, but I don't expect everyone to know that. I'm not really a MAGA Republican. I'm certainly not a nationalist. I don't inherently gravitate toward worshiping America and American idealism. If anything, I would be a Christian idealist rather than an American idealist, and I don't conflate those things at all. But I bet I'm going to be seen as MAGA just for supporting Trump here. But again, what else am I supposed to do? Support the woman who wanted to continue policies that wouldn't allow me to say what I wanted to say? Really? The atheist who visited my channel didn't seem to realize that I have perfectly valid, rational reasons for saying what I'm saying. And I have valid reasons for making 5 videos on the person. I'm not obsessed with this person. I'll probably forget about them by next week. The only reason I've clung to them for 2 weeks is because I intended to make these videos for last week, but I couldn't because I had to take care of a legal matter. And I hate leaving things undone, because even though my videos may not be very good, and I may not do them thinking I'll ever get popular with them, I still like completing the task that I have assigned myself, and that means something to me to get my words out there, especially after the 7 months of being restricted to ramble and the shoot a bit. I could also post on Motion daily, but I forgot my password and I don't want to create a new channel. I might eventually do so anyway, but for right now, I don't know my password. But having said that, I wasn't able to log on to my Gaggle account for 7 months for no other reason than for political censorship. And I have every right to complain about that. And if I support Donald Trump because he's giving me liberty of word back, that doesn't make me a cult member. It doesn't make me a Nahashi. It doesn't make me a Atheist. It doesn't mean I'm an authoritarian. It means I want the right to say what I wish. And I do not wish to be compelled by law to go against my moral conscience, which is what I stood up for, and what I would stand up for even if Donald Trump were not in the picture. And that's something that the atheist community doesn't understand, because they are progressives. Because them saying that atheists have nothing in common but their lack of belief in a God is just objectively not true today, because a lot of the people who call themselves atheists, but who endlessly talk about how irrational religion is, they all listen to the same video channels, the same websites they read, the same blogs they read, the same books they read, and they really have formed a religion out of what they think an atheist should be. It's a religion that's faced schisms between the social justice camp and the anti-social justice camp, for example. but it is still a religion that is synonymous with humanism and humanist values and humanist beliefs. And you don't really see conservatives in there. Some of them may claim to be, but they're really not. They're just progressives. They're all on the left end of the spectrum. And for all their talk about standing up for freedom against evil, right-wing authoritarianism, they're the ones that want to restrict your liberties. And this video has turned into something that isn't really about my visitor. And that's okay. I'll do another one about the visitor. That's my actual 4th video about the visitor, but technically my 5th one. But I think what I said here had to be said as well. So next week I will do one final video about my visitor, simply because I'm a completist, and I don't have time to do so now. And then I'll let the subject rest unless said visitor or someone else brings it up again. Because again, the only reason I'm making a 4th video is because there were 4 in the previous. And I usually do 3, and I do that because immediately before my exile, I would sometimes make a video and I would be told it couldn't go through, or that it was hate speech or something like that. And keep in mind, I wasn't really that hateful. I was less hateful than the people I was responding to. You can see that on Ramble, where I don't have the restrictions that I have on Gaggle, if you go to my Ramble channel. Or my Shoot a Bit. I'm not really this aggressive, hostile person. I sound more so now than I used to. Part of that's just because, well, it does get frustrating being limited, but part of it is just performative because I'm trying to evade the intelligence synthetica, which really can't understand what it is that I'm saying. It measures tone and certain matched keyword patterns. But if you actually read the generated text that creates the transcript, you'll find that it does make mistakes. And me talking in my performative way makes it make more mistakes than it would normally make. That's why I do a lot more stuttering than I used to. I used to present very clear audio takes where I would not allow like most people would do. And now I introduce deliberate stumblings because it makes it harder for the machine to follow. But having said all that, I don't really have much else to say. I'll do one last video on my atheist visitor, not because I'm particularly obsessed with them. I just want to do 4 videos on them because I did 4 last time, and this one really isn't about that person as much anymore. And then after that, I'll move on to another topic. But for now, I'll let you go. Thank you. God bless, and goodbye.